What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall market. I'm going to talk about what happened during the FOMC minutes as a new report just came out. Some big news about Tesla and why tomorrow is going to be another big day since we have big data coming out. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link that's down below, or sign up with my QR code that's right over here. If you sign up for Mumu and deposit $100, you're going to get $20 of free Nvda stock. If you deposit $2,000, you're going to get $50 worth of the stock. Deposits $10,000 to get $300 worth, and deposit $50,000 to get $1,000 of free Nvidia. You're also going to qualify for an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. That includes a 4.1% APY base rates plus a 4% APY extra for 3 months. And the offer ends very, very soon, so check out my links down below to get those free Nvidia shares. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So as far as Tesla's going, as you guys could tell, Tesla has been continuing to make lower highs over and over and over again. And as you could tell, it's just continuing to reject. Now, today we started off with a big dump in Tesla after some news came out, but then we saw Tesla try to respond with a bit of a reaction with the overall market. The market tried to bounce. We saw some bulls trying to defend. And I think this might continue into tomorrow, but there is a risk of us continuing to reject again if we end up failing. So I'm going to break down exactly why that is. Now, there was some news that came out that Elon Musk is saying that the six-seater new Tesla Model Y L may not be available in the US because of the rise of autonomous vehicles, at least according to him. He said, and this is the quote that came out from him, this variant of the Model Y doesn't start production in the US until the end of next year, might never ever, given the advent of self-driving in America. So that's what Elon Musk is saying so far. So we'll see if that ends up happening or not, right? We don't always know for sure what's going to end up happening. We do know for sure, though, that this six-seater Model Y is going to be planning a launch in China, then eventually Europe, but we're not too sure about the USA. Musk is making that very, very clear. Also, there was some good news that came out in the morning that helped Tesla bounce to an extent. Musk has made it very clear that he is, once again, or he has been involved in politics for a long while, but reports are now saying that Elon Musk has halted his plans to form a new political party and he's going to be prioritizing Tesla instead. That's what lots of reports are saying from trusted sources. We heard this all over the news, so that is some good news for Tesla, but I haven't actually heard Elon Musk confirm this. So we'll see if that's confirmed or not. Reports also suggest that he is still maintaining ties with JD Vance, the vice president, and we're going to see what ends up happening moving forward. But that is some important news so far. So if Elon Musk is not spending as much time in politics and forming a new political party, he will have more time for Tesla, and that is what the shareholders want to hear. Many shareholders made that very, very clear, especially the Tesla board. Now, when it comes to Tesla, Wedbush is saying it's going to likely outperform the market for the longer term. And our price-price ratio is once again dipping because Tesla lost some strength. Tesla's weaker compared to the market as a result of this. And then when you look at the trend, okay, notice that the market and Tesla were pushing together. Then the market and Tesla came down together. Then they started to push a bit together. But then since then, the market's been uptrending, but Tesla's been kind of like in a consolidation. So that's the only main difference right here. If the market starts dumping again, that could also influence Tesla to dip, which goes to show this is some evidence that Tesla does typically dip with the markets. It typically moves with the market. The stock market does affect it to a large extent. And then when it comes to seasonality, okay, Thursdays tend to be green about 47% of the time for Tesla. It's actually a weaker day. And then the month of August tends to be green about 50% of the time. September is green only about 46% of the time. And October is a weak month for Tesla, whereas November and December tend to be stronger. Finally, we're going to see what ends up happening because, once again, different analysts have different opinions, but Tesla's once again moving on its own. Now, when we zoom out of the Tesla chart, what you will see is that we formed a nice wick here and we managed to hold above our 50 EMA on the daily, which could spur some upside. We could attempt to see some upside as a result right over here. But if we continue to reject, the trend still suggests there could be like a bounce and a rejection. We need to get back above some key levels to bounce. We're not really getting that confirmation quite yet. Now, if Tesla fails at 321, though, there's going to be a risk of a lot more downside because, once again, that's going to be a break below our daily support. So you want to be very careful at that level. The daily does suggest more downsides coming. We might bounce a little bit, but there is a risk of some downside as a result of what the daily chart is telling us. Now, on the 4-hour time frames, what you'll see is that SPY, although this is to be determined depending on Jerome Powell's speech on Friday and the data coming out tomorrow, which I'll talk about in just a few minutes. Although it depends on that stuff, we do have a possible head and shoulders like setup, and if we keep projecting, this could lead to more downside on SPY. On the QQQ, same thing. Ignore the lines, guys. I'm just showing you guys my levels. But this also has kind of like a head and shoulders like pattern. And then as this is trying to bounce from here, it could bounce a bit before it continues to fall. So you want to be careful with tech as the overall market is showing weakness. I just want to go over that real quick to show you how it's affecting Tesla. As the market's been dipping, Tesla's getting affected as well. It's getting dragged into this volatility. Why is that? Well, it's the algorithms. The market is dictated by algorithms, and they're getting adjusted because of what's happening overall, and that's what's affecting Tesla. So that's what's happening for now. There is that downside risk in terms of this trend. Before, Tesla was making higher highs and higher lows. Now it's starting to show lower high right here, lower low, lower high, lower low, starting to downtrend. So that might continue at least for the time being. So what do I think is going to happen in the future? Let's talk about some data, and then I'm going to break down exactly what's going to likely happen to Tesla SPY, the QQQ, and the others. So today we got the FOMC minutes report. 9 out of the 12 FOMC members expressed concerns about the risk of the Fed's dual mandates for employment growth and keeping inflation under 2%. Two members, namely Christopher Waller and Michelle Bowman, were more concerned about the labor market weakness. So this is some important news. So a lot of these Fed officials, they want to see a cut, but they're not as certain about it because of the higher inflationary risks and the effects that we're going to see to their dual mandate. Why is that? Well, look at CPI. All items CPI was flat, but core CPI went up quite a bit, so there is that upside risk to inflation. The PPI data, the wholesale inflation, came out last week, and this was the highest increase in 3 years. So we're seeing a big increase in the wholesale inflation. And then on top of this, a study that came out from the Yale budget is saying that we could be anticipating higher grocery prices and more increases in prices during the month of August as a result of President Trump's tariffs, because the U.S. effective tariff rate went from being as low as 2.4%. Now it's been officially at 18.61% as of August 7th. So that could once again influence prices, at least to some extent. Now, President Trump put on his Truth Social page that there is no inflation. Every sign points towards a major cut. He is correct to think that a cut is necessary. I could see a lot of arguments for that because many people believe the Fed is still behind, and even a small cut is like not really out of the water. But at the same time, he is incorrect to say there is no inflation. We're quite clearly seeing, according to the data, inflation is still at risk of going up. That's my honest, unbiased assessment of that. There is that risk of higher inflation. And that's what's really affecting what we're seeing from the overall target rate probabilities. So yesterday, there was an 85% chance the Fed was going to give us a cut. Now it went down to 82% after the FOMC minutes came out, and this could be affected again by Jerome Powell's speech. What else is affecting things is President Trump's tariffs. President Trump and his team have expanded the 50% tariff on steel and aluminum to include an additional 407 products. This could be what caused the market to sell off to some extent. So this could once again affect prices, steel, more products, and higher tariffs. That's important news. On top of this, President Trump also talked about the possibility of increasing tariffs on semiconductors to 200 to 300%. He said this week or next week he's going to likely do it. That could be another thing affecting us. So I went over some negative effects of the tariffs, such as the effect on GDP, prices, and such. But there is some good news about the tariffs according to the S&P Global. This is a very important rating agency, and what they found is that they believe there's going to be a meaningful amount of federal revenue from President Trump's tariffs that's going to offset the weaker revenue expected from the Big Beautiful Bill. They maintain their AA plus rating on the long-term U.S. sovereign debt and an A-1 plus rating on basically short-term sovereign credit. So that's what we're seeing so far. This is some good news because at the end of the day, yes, the tariffs are going to once again affect us for the short term, higher prices, inflation, and such. But in the longer term, they are going to be increasing the overall revenue the U.S. government makes, which they could be using to offset some of the pain. And President Trump is arguing it's going to be worth it. Could he be right? Could he be wrong? That's up to you guys to decide. But I just want to be very unbiased when I say that. There will be good and bad things from the tariffs, but for now, there is a short-term risk, according to studies, that we could see an increase in inflation. And this is what brings me to Jerome Powell. So on Friday in 2 days, Jerome Powell is going to be giving a speech at Jackson Hole, and reports are saying this could be a make or break for the stock market. That is correct. I think that if Jerome Powell is more in favor of there being some kind of cuts, if he is once again optimistic that inflation's not looking too bad, that could help the market rally. But if Jerome Powell is hawkish and he starts saying things about how there's uncertainty about inflation, there's a risk of higher inflation, we don't know if the Fed's going to cut, that could cause the probability of us getting a cut in September to drop, because he might say we have to wait on the data. We don't know. Inflation is still risky for the short term. If this starts going down, that could be because the market might dump. If he causes the market to sell off and he rug pulls the markets, it's possible. So you want to be prepared for anything on Friday. Jerome Powell gives a speech. Now, before Friday, we have Thursday, which is going to be tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. An hour before the stock market opens, we have the initial jobless claims data and data from the Philly Fed involving new orders, prices, and other pieces of data. And then at 9:45 a.m., we have the S&P Global Composite Manufacturing and Services PMI reports. That could cause higher volatility, so be ready just to be safe. There's going to likely be a big move as a result. Right now, there's some greed in the markets, but will the greed last? Will we still see buyers defense? You have to be very, very careful. Momentum is still at neutral. And last but not least, when it comes to earnings, like I talked about in my morning video, we have Walmart and Ross announcing earnings tomorrow. Today we got Target and TJ Maxx, which both did well. Target did sell off because the CEO is going to step down, though, despite beating EPS and revenue. And TJ Maxx's parent company did well, beating on expectations, good earnings. Anyways, that is it about the news, guys. I've gone over all the news you need to know, at least heading into tomorrow. Let's talk about the charts. What do I think is going to happen moving forward? Well, if you're a bear on Tesla, you want to see us fill at 321. If we can't hold that for 4 hours, there's going to be a risk of us continuing to fall. If you're a bull on Tesla, you want to see us get back above 330. If we get back above 330, we could try to get back in this upper range to 335. I'm a bit in the middle, so what I think is going to happen is we might try to bounce a bit more towards our EMAs. We could try to retest 328, which is where our EMAs happen to be, but then once we hit that, we could reject and start dipping lower, and there is going to be a risk of us getting some kind of rejection. Whether it's because of the data tomorrow, it might cause a small bounce in consolidation, or if it's Jerome Powell's speech on Friday, there is a risk of Tesla doing something like this, in my personal opinion. I think we're still technically in this downtrend, and there's no sign of us invalidating this unless Tesla gets a massive bounce and gets back above 335. We don't have confirmation yet, so as of right now, the trend favors a small bounce for 328, then a potential rejection after that. So make sure you're ready just to be safe. When it comes to SPY, okay, the same thing's essentially going on. We have a very, very similar trend, at least right now. So SPY is trying to rebound at least to a small extent, but here's the thing about SPY. We're also on a larger downtrend. And here's what I mean. So when it comes to SPY, notice that before it was higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows. Now we've rejected, we're making lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. So this is starting to turn more bearish. Now, on top of this, this also resembles a head and shoulders, left shoulder, head, and right shoulder, and that could also favor downside. My prediction is that if you're a bear, you want to see us lose 633 to dump. If you're a bull, you want to see us get back above 640 to 642. If 640 breaks, we're looking for 642 plus to break out higher. Both of those are possibilities, but the odds favor. We might push for essentially 638 to 640. It depends on if we could hold above 638 to push for 640 or not. But ultimately, we might dip again and retest 633, and then we could be dipping lower, forming a head and shoulders. I think this is the most likely possibility on SPY. So keep that in mind. There could be a head and shoulders forming. I do favor that unless we see a big pump above 640. So we'll see just to be safe, but there could be a bounce and a rejection. On the QQQ, it's the same thing. We're making lower highs just like this. We're forming a double bottom. There's a gap to fill down here at 553 on the QQQ. Now we could push for basically 568 to 570, which is where our EMAs happen to be. If we break 570, we're looking for a bigger push, but if we don't, we could reject right here and then continue to fall back down towards the lower 560s. So look for a small bounce towards 570, and we'll see if you reject or not on the QQQ. 568 to 570 can be tested before we reject, but ultimately the trend still looks more bearish. So be very, very careful. Might see a small bounce before we turn right back down. When it comes to the IWM Russell 2000, the same thing's essentially going on. We're on a downtrend. Now, as you guys can tell, we basically have this resistance at this white trend line. We could be testing 226. If we can't break past that, we may continue to downtrend back down to the low 221s. Look for a small bounce for 226 to 227, then a rejection. On ES, the same thing's essentially going on. We could be retesting essentially this resistance around 64.35 or so. If we can't break past that, we could just reject and continue to downtrend as time goes on. Once again, we have a left shoulder, head, and then right shoulder forming, taking us much lower. So I anticipate we might be bouncing a bit for essentially 64.30 to 64.40, like in that range. And then we could downtrend and continue to fall, forming a head and shoulders. So be very careful. On NQ, we're looking like we could be dipping more. This might try to push for this imbalance around 23,400 to 23,500. That's where the 20 EMA happens to be. We need to hold above 23,500 to have some hope for bulls. If we can't, there's going to be a risk of us seeing another leg down, and this could continue to fall in this head and shoulders like pattern. So I do see a risk of this setup. I think this is most likely what we're going to be doing, a little bit of a bounce before we reject. But we'll see. Watch your levels just to be safe. Let's see if we can get back above 23,425. On Bitcoin, we have resistance around 114,868 and 116,000. Might push a bit, and then we'll see if we reject and turn back down from there. So be very, very mindful of that. For Tesla, we're trying to rebound a bit. We could be retesting 328, like I said, but then there's going to be a risk of us rejecting right back down. On Nvidia, we might be bouncing back up for essentially 178. Whoops, let me pull up the right thing. Sorry about that, guys. We're looking for essentially 176 to 178. And then here's the problem with Nvidia. We'll see if we reject near 178, because the problem is that if you look at Nvidia, this looks like it's forming a distribution pattern just like this, and this might just continue to fall all the way down. There's also a gap all the way down here, and we might just continue to form an arc just like this, taking us right back down. On Aapl, let's see if we could hold 225. If we don't, we're still going to continue to dump to 221 to 220. There's a left shoulder, head, maybe right shoulder forming, taking us right back down, so be careful. For Netflix, I'm going to go kind of quickly with the rest of these. I just have a couple minutes left. So Netflix might retest 1220 to 1225. We're going to see if this rejects right back down, forming the left shoulder, head, and then right shoulder we're talking about. Be careful with Netflix. MSTR looks a bit more bullish. It's favoring a push for basically 350 to 357, and we'll see if you reject off that or not. Celsius is on a very, very nice uptrend, forming a bearish divergence. It might try to push for essentially 62 and then turn back down to 59, so be careful. Supermicro is on a downtrend. We might bounce a little bit back up towards this 44 area, and then we're going to see if we reject or not off this to continue to fall, so be very mindful of that. For Palantir, we're going to try to push back up towards this 164 to 166 area, and then we're going to see if we reject right back down, so be very careful. Rivian's kind of flat right here. We could be pushing for essentially 12.17, and I just see some consolidation. Like, this is not really doing much. SoFi is going to likely push back up towards our EMAs. I could see a retest of this level right here, the 23 area, then see if it rejects. It has a double top rejection. There is some downside risk. As we predicted, AMD is bouncing off this trend line. See the trend line right over here. We're bouncing off this, so we could be pushing back up to 171. Then we'll see if we reject. 168 to 170 could be tested. We'll see if we turn back down, so be very careful. ARM is trying to bounce right here. We could be trying to get back up towards this resistance around this 134 area, and then we'll see if we turn back down towards 128. Palantir could also be retesting essentially 68. If we test 68, we'll see if we turn back down from there to continue to dip. On Coinbase, we could be once again retesting this resistance right here around this 312 to 315 area. Then we'll see if we kind of reject and continue to fall, forming a head and shoulders. Amazon's range bound. If we break past 225, we're looking for a bigger break. But if we lose 220, we're looking for a dump. I think we're kind of in the middle right here. But here's the thing. Even if this pushes a bit to like 225 and consolidates, this could still dump. We need to get back above like 227 to really bounce. If it doesn't, we still have a head and shoulders on Amazon that could take us a lot lower. On Meta, I could see this retest the resistance becoming, or the support becoming resistance at 757 to 760. Then we'll see if we turn and continue to fall from there. Google could also retest essentially 200 to 202, and then we'll see if we turn back down towards 198. And then Microsoft might be also retesting the resistance right here around 509. So it might retest 509, and then we'll see if we reject back down to 502. Look for a bounce and rejection as time goes on. For a few more, DJT might try to rebound back up towards this 17.3 area before it turns back down. The VIX is on a downtrend. We're going to see if this rebounds a little bit. Here's the thing about the VIX, right? This essentially has a inverse head and shoulders. There's a left shoulder, head, and then a right shoulder. If we essentially dip a little bit more, this could be a sign the market's going to try to bounce just a bit. But later on, I do think this is going to try to bounce once we get close to the end of August to September. And we have this gap to fill. So this could be a nice inverse head and shoulders breakout. And that could mean that the market has some downside finally coming. The 10-year is kind of flat here. We're going to see if we break 4.31 or not. We're still kind of flat waiting for Jerome Powell's speech on Friday. The dollar is starting to uptrend. That could be a bearish sign for markets, and crude is starting to climb a bit, which typically happens during the seasonal patterns. So could the market bounce a bit? Yes, we might be going a bit higher, but then I do expect another rejection. I think that's the most likely possibility. Same with Tesla. We could be pushing for 328 to 330. Then we'll see if it rejects as well. It's on a bit of a downtrend, so be prepared for more downside. Be prepared for some data tomorrow as we have our Philly Fed data and initial jobs claims in the morning, alongside some PMI reports at 9:45 a.m. Then we have Jerome Powell giving a speech on Friday, so all of this could be affecting the markets. We'll see what happens if there's any updates involving the tariffs and such, so I'll keep you guys updated. Until I see you guys again tomorrow, I thank you all so much for listening. I wish you all nothing but the best. I'll see you guys very, very soon on the next one. Thank you for listening. Tesla to the moon, the long term is still very bright despite the short-term volatility and the short-term nuances that are going on in the markets right now. And I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow. Thank you for listening, and peace out.